Hey guys, welcome to Y&R Daily Update YouTube channel. Today's topics. The Young and the Restless spoilers shocked no one in Genoa City truly understood Carter. Not really. To the public eye, he was merely Kane's elusive assistant. Discreet, efficient, and deeply loyal, he existed in the shadows, running errands, delivering files, making calls that never appeared on company records. To most, he was background noise in the high-stakes symphony of the Chancellor Newman Abbott power struggle. But beneath that quiet veneer was something far more dangerous, an obsession that festered in silence. Born not from admiration, but from something darker, a fractured identity tethered entirely to one man. Kane. For Carter, Kane wasn't just a boss. He was a savior, a beacon, a figure so intoxicatingly powerful and commanding that Carter reshaped his entire sense of purpose around him. Somewhere along the way, devotion turned into dependence, and dependence soured into delusion. Kane didn't ask for worship, but Carter gave it to him anyway, without condition, without reason, without sanity. So when the French estate gathering was arranged, ostensibly a business retreat, a strategy summit among influential players, Carter saw an opportunity, not for himself, but for Kane. He had watched the tension grow between Kane and Damien Kane, a rival in both commerce and presence. He had seen how Damien's charisma disrupted Kane's control of the narrative, how his very existence was a threat to the fragile power Kane was trying to rebuild. And Carter believed with warped clarity that eliminating that threat would protect Kane's legacy, protect his future, secure Carter's place at his side forever. That's how the plan began. The whispers, the misdirection, the carefully staged movement of guests, the isolated bourbon decanter, the carefully placed knife. Carter had studied everyone's patterns. He knew when Damien would be alone. He knew Nick would be near enough to frame. He knew Chance would be armed, distracted, and protective. But what Carter didn't anticipate, what unraveled everything, was chaos. Chance entered the room at the wrong moment. Damien fought harder than expected. The blade went too deep. The framing wasn't clean. Blood soaked the marble. And by the time it was over, two men lay dead. One man stood trembling, and Carter fled into the night. Later, when he returned to Kane's private quarters, breathless, stained, expecting praise, he found only horror. Kane looked at him not with pride, but with revulsion. "What have you done?" he asked, voice hoarse with disbelief. And for the first time, Carter felt something he didn't recognize. Shame, not regret, not yet. But the first crack in the foundation. Kane didn't thank him. He didn't call him loyal. He called him reckless. He called him dangerous. And that moment broke something inside Carter that could never be repaired. He had killed for love, twisted, blind love. And it hadn't been enough. Worse, it had become the wedge that finally pushed him away from the man he was trying to protect. In the following days, Carter unraveled in silence. He still did Kane's bidding. Still managed logistics. Still intercepted calls. But in private, his world was collapsing. He began hearing things. Damien's voice, Chance's final gasp. He imagined the look on Kane's face over and over again, each time more distorted with disgust. He watched from the shadows as Nick was arrested, tried to force himself to believe the frame-up would hold, that the police wouldn't dig deeper. But guilt made him sloppy. Files weren't deleted properly. A security camera he forgot to scrub. A fingerprint on the wine glass. The noose was tightening, not legally, but emotionally. And Carter wasn't built to survive emotional exposure. For years, he had suppressed the voice that asked him who he was without Kane. Now it screamed inside him day and night, demanding an answer he couldn't give. He confessed one night, not to the police, not to the press, but to Kane. Tearfully, pitifully, in the dim silence of Kane's office. "You made me," he said. "You built me. You showed me how to survive." Kane, exhausted, still grieving Damien's death and now publicly under suspicion, could only respond with silence. That silence was the final verdict. Not rage, not forgiveness, just nothing. It was over. Carter no longer mattered. And so, in the early hours of the following morning, Carter made his final move. He wrote a letter, sealed and signed, left on Kane's desk, and then he vanished. His body was found the next day in a remote ravine just outside Genoa City, an apparent suicide. No note, no explanation, just the hollow echo of a man who had given everything and received nothing. When the news broke, Genoa City was stunned, not by the suicide itself, but by the web it unraveled. Journalists dug deeper. Prosecutors reopened files. Chance's family demanded an independent investigation. The framing of Nick fell apart under renewed scrutiny, and Kane, suddenly thrust into the center of a storm he had not engineered, was forced to reckon with what had truly happened. He hadn't asked Carter to kill anyone. That was the truth. But he had built Carter. He had fed his loyalty, reinforced his dependency, shaped him into a weapon of silent obedience. And when that weapon detonated, Kane couldn't claim innocence. Not entirely. Jill, already furious with Billy for his chancellor schemes, now turned her rage to Kane as well. "You knew who he was," she hissed. "You let that man into our lives, into our company, into Chance's orbit." And Kane had no answer because deep down, he knew he had ignored the signs. He had benefited from Carter's devotion until it became inconvenient. And now people were dead, families shattered, and the reputation of an entire dynasty lay in ruins. The city grieved, but it also remembered that behind every polished boardroom, every estate party, every champagne toast and smiling alliance, there were ghosts. And sometimes those ghosts were not born from strangers, but from the broken men we trained to follow us. Carter was not a monster by birth. He was created, molded, directed, until he became the blade that cut too deep. In the end, he died alone. But he left behind a silence louder than any confession. And for those who had watched, used, or ignored him, there would be no absolution. Not in this lifetime. The tragedy of Carter was not in the violence he committed, or the chaos he unleashed, but in the aching silence of his existence long before any blood was spilled. To those who knew him only as Kane's loyal assistant, quiet, capable, omnipresent, he seemed like a shadow in a tailored suit. The kind of man who appeared and vanished with purpose, who delivered results without explanation and loyalty without question. But what no one truly saw, what Kane himself, perhaps, never fully understood, was that Carter wasn't just loyal. He was broken. And in Kane, he had found not a boss, not a mentor, but a meaning. Carter had been invisible before that, forgotten by a world that never offered him a place to belong, orphaned by chance or choice. Left to survive on the streets where names meant nothing and futures disappeared with the sunrise. He didn't come from money. He didn't come from family. He came from void. And then one day, Kane Ashab offered him a hand. Whether it was charity, strategy, or impulse, that moment became a pillar of Carter's entire identity. From then on, everything he did, every stolen document, every forged signature, every illegal land transfer and manipulated asset was not for money or even survival. It was for Dama's. Because Kane wasn't just Kane to Carter. He was Dama's alter ego, born out of secrecy, of deception, of reinvention. When Kane needed to disappear to mask his actions beneath layers of misdirection, he became Aristotle Dumas, enigmatic, powerful, untouchable. And Carter, molded by the very illusion that gave his life structure, followed suit. He called him Damas even when no one else did. He called him Damas in private, in whispers, like a prayer. He didn't just serve the man. He worshipped the myth. He copied it, mimicked it, mirrored it, until his own identity dissolved entirely into the role he had been assigned. And Kane led him, not cry, not with intent, but with negligence. The kind of negligence born from privilege, from assuming others will always serve without cost. Carter was never truly an employee. He was a projection, a vessel for Kane's darker needs. A man who lived and breathed through the borrowed authority of someone who never once stopped to ask who Carter truly was. When Carter spoke, in one of his rare moments of emotional unraveling, he confessed the origin of his loyalty, that he had been homeless, that he had slept in doorways, that he had eaten from trash bins behind buildings, not unlike Chancellor Winters, that the first time Kane gave him a job, even a petty one, even just organizing files, was the first time anyone looked at him without disgust. "You gave me a name," he said. "You gave me a face, and that was all it took." From then on, Carter followed orders with the devotion of a disciple. When Kane whispered about land deals, Carter made them happen. When Kane mused about legal loopholes, Carter crafted them. When Kane resurrected Damas, Carter became his shield, his decoy, even his mask. In Nice, Carter disguised himself as Aristotle Dios more than once. Not for strategy, but because it made him feel alive, important, real. But as time went on, the lines between role and reality blurred. Carter no longer knew who he was when Kane wasn't watching. This disassociation reached its apex in France, where paranoia, resentment, and emotional collapse fused into something deadly. Carter saw enemies where there were none. He viewed Damien as a user, not just of power, but of Kane's attention. He misread every glance, every moment, believing Kane was slipping away from him. That their bond, if it could ever truly be called that, was dissolving. And so he acted, not with reason, but with desperation. The assassination attempt was not calculated strategy. It was an emotional implosion masquerading as loyalty. He struck out, creating a ripple that led to Damien's apparent death, the accidental murder of Chance, and the false framing of Nick. The fallout was immediate and irreversible. Kane's reaction shattered what little hope Carter had left. When he realized that his actions had not been sanctioned, that Kane hadn't even wanted this, hadn't even considered him capable of something so extreme, he crumbled. He cried. He apologized. He said again and again that he was only trying to protect Dumas, that he thought this was what Kane needed, that everything he had done was for him. Kane's silence in that moment was louder than 1,000 condemnations. And for Carter, it was a severing. His mind, already teetering on the edge of delusion, finally broke. The grief of being rejected by the one person he lived for was too much. There was no reality left to cling to, only shame. And then silence. When Carter took his own life days later, it was without ceremony. No final statement, no recorded confession, just a man walking into the quiet with nothing left to hold on to. His death wasn't covered in newspapers. His name barely registered outside the circle of those directly involved. Kane, for his part, grieved in confusion and guilt. He had never asked Carter to become what he became, but in failing to see the man behind the role, he had enabled a tragedy. He had weaponized a soul, already at war with itself. The aftermath left everyone reeling. Jill questioned why Kane had ever allowed someone so unstable into their orbit. Billy viewed it as another stain on the already tarnished estate fiasco. And the fans, those who had watched Carter from the background for months, suddenly found themselves mourning a man they never really knew, haunted by the realization that he was never truly part of Kane's world, not in the way he believed. In the end, the question remained unanswered. Was Carter just an unfortunate pawn who lost himself in the illusion, or was there more? There had been whispers, after all, hints that he might be connected to the DeLeon family, that his loyalty came not just from survival, but from blood, from secrets passed down through broken lineages and corporate wars. But with his death, those possibilities died too. No one could confirm his origins. No one would ever know if he had been planted, if he had a mission beyond Kane, or if his entire existence truly had revolved around a man who never saw him as more than useful. The trip to Nice, once envisioned as a luxurious summit of power, players ended as a gothic nightmare, a tangled tapestry of false identities, lost sanity, and violent ends. Damien was gone. Chance too. Nick nearly ruined. Kane forever tainted. And Carter, a man shaped by need, consumed by obsession and erased by his own hand, became the ghost who would haunt them all. Not for what he did, but for what he represented. The consequence of ignoring the people we used to hold up our own illusions. And that is the true tragedy of Carter. He never had a place, not in Genoa City, not in Kane's life, not in his own skin. He wore the name Demos like armor, believing it made him worthy, but in the end, it only made him invisible. The transcript reveals a dark and tragic narrative centered around Carter, a shadowy figure in the world of the young and the restless, known publicly as Kane's discreet and loyal assistant. Carter's true nature and depth of obsession were hidden beneath this facade. His identity was entirely entwined with Kane, whom he saw not just as a boss but as a savior and the center of his existence. Over time, this devotion twisted into dangerous delusion. At a strategic business retreat in France, Carter's warped loyalty drove him to orchestrate the assassination of Damien Kane, Kane's rival, believing that removing Damien would protect Kane's legacy and cement his own place by Kane's side. However, the plan went catastrophically wrong, resulting in Damien's death, the accidental killing of Chance, and the framing of Nick. When Carter returned to Kane expecting approval, he was met with revulsion, which shattered his fragile sense of purpose. He spiraled into guilt, paranoia, and emotional collapse, struggling to maintain his role while haunted by the consequences of his actions. His confession to Kane that Kane had created and defined him was met with silence, signaling the end of their connection. Feeling abandoned and broken, Carter ultimately took his own life. A suicide that stunned Genoa City and unraveled a larger web of intrigue and tragedy. The aftermath exposed Kane's indirect responsibility for molding Carter into a dangerous weapon of loyalty, raising harsh questions about neglect and accountability. Carter, once invisible and forgotten by the world, became a ghost haunting the city, a symbol of the cost of using and ignoring broken individuals for personal gain. His death left many unanswered questions about his origins and true purpose, but what remains clear is the profound tragedy of a man who never truly belonged anywhere. Lost in the illusion of power and identity, highlights Carter's identity was completely bound to Kane, evolving from loyalty to dangerous obsession. The assassination attempt at the French summit resulted in multiple deaths and a major scandal. Kane's rejection of Carter after the incident shattered Carter's psyche and sense of purpose. Carter's confession to Kane exposed the deep emotional dependency that defined his existence. Carter's suicide marked a tragic end to a man, shaped by neglect and unrecognized loyalty. The fallout triggered investigations, unraveling false accusations and exposing hidden fractures. Carter's story symbolizes the tragic consequences of exploiting broken individuals for power. Key insights: the fragility of identity tied to another. Carter's story highlights how an individual's identity can become dangerously fragile when entirely dependent on another person. His complete emotional and psychological fusion with Kane led to delusion and self-destruction. This underscores the risks inherent in relationships where one party becomes a vessel for the other's power and influence, losing their sense of self in the process. Obsession masquerading as loyalty can be destructive. Carter's loyalty was not healthy allegiance but an obsessive devotion that blinded him to reality. His actions, intended as protection for Kane, caused irreparable harm. This reflects how obsessive loyalty, especially when unreciprocated or unacknowledged, can escalate into violence and tragedy. The role of negligence in enabling tragedy. Kane's failure was in his negligence, he never intended Carter's downfall but ignored the warning signs of Carter's instability. This highlights how leaders or figures of authority can inadvertently weaponize loyalty by failing to see the human cost of their influence, especially when they treat people as tools rather than individuals. The complexity of power and control in corporate and personal relationships. The intertwined corporate rivalry and personal dynamics between Kane, Damien, and their entourages reveal how power struggles can mask deeper emotional fractures and lead to catastrophic consequences. Carter's role as a shadow operative reflects the unseen layers of manipulation and control that underpin visible conflicts. Psychological collapse under pressure. Carter's mental unraveling after the botched assassination attempt shows the psychological toll of guilt, rejection, and disillusionment. His hearing voices and paranoia illustrate a mind breaking under the weight of trauma and isolation, emphasizing the importance of mental health support in high-stress, loyalty-driven environments. The tragedy of invisible people in powerful circles. Carter's background: homelessness, anonymity, and invisibility speaks to a broader theme about the people who exist on the margins of wealth and power. Despite his proximity to influence, he remained fundamentally unseen and unvalued as a person. A tragic figure molded and discarded by the very system he served. Unanswered questions and lost histories. The hints about Carter's possible ties to the De Leon family and the mystery surrounding his true origins add a layer of unresolved intrigue. This ambiguity reflects the complexity of identity in stories of power and loyalty, where personal histories can be erased or obscured, leaving key truths forever lost with the individual's demise. Conclusion: Carter's story in The Young and the Restless is a poignant and complex exploration of loyalty, identity, and tragedy within a high-stakes world of power and deception. His transformation from a forgotten street survivor into a dangerously obsessed assistant illustrates how fragile human beings can be when their sense of self is sacrificed for another. The catastrophic fallout from his actions serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of neglect and the deep human cost behind corporate and personal power struggles. Ultimately, Carter's life and death challenge viewers to consider the invisible people behind every empire and the ghosts that haunt those who build their kingdoms on fragile foundations.